In social psychology, we would be discussing on impression management. What is the concept of impression management, followed by the theories of self-representation and the impact of impression management, why people engage in impression management, the causes, followed by major approaches and tactics of impression management, of course, in the organizational setup. Impression management is the process by which individuals attempt or make attempts to control the impression or mental representations of others form of them. People always have a strong desire to make a favorable impression on others. This is according to Goffman. He devised the theory of impression management that relates to how we create, maintain and enhance our social identities. So, he stated that the concept of impression management is the process by which people in social situations manage the circumstances, that is clothing, words and attitudes to corresponding impressions. So, impression management is a fundamental aspect of social interaction. People try either consciously or subconsciously to manipulate and control the way that others perceive whenever they interact, either through presenting a public image of themselves or influencing a particular person, as in interviews. Since the desire to make a favorable impression on others is a strong one, so most of us do our best to look good to others when we meet them for the first time. So, social psychologists, they use the term impression management or self-representation to describe these efforts to make a good impression on others. And the result of their research on this process suggests that it is well worth the effort. There are certain theories of self-representation, and first theory is symbolic interactionism. This is done by Coley and Mead. So, the participants in social interactions, they try to take the role of the other and see themselves as others see them. Second theory is presentation of the self in everyday life, and this is formulated by Goffman. Social interaction is a theatrical performance. Every person chooses a face as a background for social interaction. The third theory is situated identities. That means, for each social setting there is a pattern of social behavior that conveys an identity particularly appropriate for that setting. So, these are the three theories of self-presentation. People who perform impression management successfully do often gain important advantages in many situations. Impression management is used synonymously with self-presentation, which means how a person tries to influence the perception of their own image. We present ourselves depending on the situation and others' perception about us. In addition to impression, self-representation here involves expression of ideals and identity and establishing a reputation that reflects them. So, we want people to know who and how we really are. So, what are the tactics of self-presentation? Here, the first tactic here is ingratiation. That means, the goal of ingratiatory is being likable. This involves complimenting another person or indulging in flattery with certain amount of credibility and honesty. It also involves conforming to another person's viewpoint. Next tactic is intimidation. So, a strategy in which the person arouses fear among others to get the work done. So, he does not care about being likable, all he wants is to control others and exercise his powers. And third tactic is self-promotion. This is a kind of advertising. The self-promoter wants to be seen as competent in certain areas. So, he may acknowledge minor flaws in his skills while emphasizing stronger points of his personality. So, however, if he claims don't match his abilities, then he may create a very bad impression. Next is exemplification. In this, the person tries to elicit the impression of moral worthiness and integrity while creating a feeling of guilt among others. So, when a person says, I will finish this work even if I fall sick, but you go and enjoy. This is called as exemplification. Supplication, in this, the person advertises his weaknesses in order to get sympathy. The person portrays himself as helpless to get the help from others. So, why do people engage in impression management? So far we have assumed that people engage in impression management for one straightforward reason, that is to enhance others' reaction to them. This is certainly the primary reason for such behavior. But research findings indicate that there are many others too. For instance, efforts at impression management serve to boost the moods of people who engage in it. As suggested by facial feedback hypothesis, efforts to appear cheerful, happy and pleasant might generate it increases in such feelings. So, in other words, by attempting to appear happy and positive, people may actually encourage such feelings. So, in a research done by Dunn, Bisang, Human and Finn, so they suggested that this is really the case. So, they had this dating couples rate their moods, both behavior and after interacting with an opposite sex stranger or their own dating partner. Although the participants predicted that they would feel happier after interacting with their own dating partner, they actually showed a bigger boost in moods after interacting with a stranger. Why? Perhaps because they engaged in more impression management with a stranger than their own partners. In a sense, this is not surprising. Almost everyone has had the experience of feeling happier and more positive after special efforts to enhance their own appearance. So, before a promo or other special event. So, in short, although we generally engage in impression management in order to increase others' evaluations of us, there may be some extra benefits to such tactics for the people who use them. So, attempting to look good to others can often make us feel better in a very basic ways. So, the three major approaches identified to manage one's impressions are described here. So, they are number 1, authentic impression management. So, this is the method used when an individual desires to present him or herself to others in the same manner in which he or she perceives self. So, individual behaves in a consistent way with their daily image and personality. Now, second major approach is ideal impression management. So, this method involves personal image makeover techniques such as drastic change in wardrobes, hairstyle or speech. Individual makes an attempt to present an image of how one desires others to view him. Now, third one, tactical impression management. So, this method is used by individuals who wish to present the public image that reflects most positively on them. So, this technique is often used to create a behavior or personality that is consistent with outside perceptions of how an individual should conduct their behavior. Now, we are going to discuss about the other significant tactics in impression management. So, the tactics people use to create favorable impressions on others and the significance of impression management and subsequent behavior in social or work situations, they are discussed in detail. Now, there has been a wide research in this area and observed that while individuals use many different techniques for boosting their image, most of these fall under two major categories. One is self enhancement, that means personal efforts to increase their appeal to others, and the second major category is other enhancement, that means efforts to make the target person feel good in various ways. With respect to self enhancement, specific strategies include efforts to boost one's appearance, either physical or professional. Now, physical appearance relates to the attractiveness and physical appeal of the individual, while professional appearance relates to personal grooming, appropriate dressing and personal hygiene, etc. So, the existence of huge beauty aids and clothing industries suggests ways in which people attempt to improve both aspects of their appearance. Now, what are the additional tactics of self enhancement? These are involving efforts to appear competent and accomplished through such steps as number 1, describing past achievements, describing positive qualities one possess. For example, I am very easygoing, I am organized and get things done on time. And next is taking responsibility for positive events in one's life that occurred in the past. Example, I am graduated early because I really worked hard, or explaining how they overcame daunting obstacles in life. So, several of these tactics are readily visible in online dating services like Match.com, and in information people post about themselves on Facebook or other social networks where people attempt to look good to others. Now, especially for romantic partners or friends or new friends, etc. Now, another major group of impression management tactics are known as other enhancement. So, in these strategies, individuals basically they seek to induce positive moods and reactions in others through the use of a variety of tactics. Especially according to Byrne, perhaps the most commonly used tactic of this type is ingratiation. Now, what is this? Flattering others in various ways. So, additional tactics of other enhancement involves expressing agreement with the target person's view, showing a high degree of interest in this person, doing small favors for them, asking for their advice and feedback in some manner. So, or expressing liking for them non-verbally, like through eye contact, for example, nodding in agreement and smiling, etc. Now, we would be discussing the techniques of impression management, especially in organizational setup. Before that, the key question is, do these techniques of impression management succeed in generating positive feelings and reactions on the part of the people toward whom they are directed? So, the answer provided by a growing body of literature is very clear, yes. So, a growing body of literature provides evidence that if the tactics are used with skill and care, they are highly effective in impression management. For example, in a recent meta-analysis by Barrick, Schaffer and DeGrassi, they examined the results of dozens of studies concerned with the tactics and success of impression management, of course, in general with people and organizations in specific. So, the process by which individuals attempt to control the impression others form of them, and by doing so being perceived positively by others, and should have benefits for people, as I already said, people in general, organizations in specific. So, impression management, for instance, help them in organization initially to get the jobs they want in an organization, and once hired to get favorable evaluations, superior salary increases and more rapid promotions in a political context. It might help sway the distributions of advantages in their favor. So, the studies were primarily concerned with the use of impression management tactics in job interviews, and results indicated that in this respect impression management is often very successful. The greater the extent to which job applicants used various tactics of impression management, the higher the ratings they received from interviewers, and so the more likely they were to be hired. So, this was especially true when interviews were mostly open-ended rather than carefully structured. But overall, there was clear evidence that using both self-enhancement, other enhancement tactics, they were beneficial to job tactics, did succeed in raising their evaluations in the interviews, mostly in interviews. In addition, this meta-analysis examined another important question: what happens after people who use impression management successfully once they are hired? Do they actually turn out to be excellent employees? There are some grounds for predicting that this would be true. People who use impression management tactics successfully may be higher in social skills than people who don't. So, as a result, after they are hired, they may get along better with others, and this can help them succeed in their new jobs. On the other hand, many other factors aside from being effective in making a good first impressions on others play a role in job performance too. So, the relationship between these two factors, use of impression management tactics and job performance, may be relatively weak. So, that is exactly what Barrick and colleagues found. So, while effective use of impression management tactics did increase ratings by interviewers, they were only weakly related to later ratings of actual job performance. So, as the authors note, what you see, that means in an interview, may not be true in terms of excellent job performance later on. So, many other studies report similar findings and conclusions. For example, by Wayne, Leiden, Graf, Ferris, Wheat, all these say the same. But, and this is an important but, the use of these tactics also involves potential pitfalls. If they are overused or used ineffectively, they can backfire and produce negative rather than positive reactions from others. For instance, if one interesting study by Wong finds strong evidence for what she termed the slim effect or slime effect, a tendency to form very negative impressions of others who play up to their superiors, but treat subordinates with disdain and contempt. So, in other research, it has been reported that the use of too many different tactics of impression management, especially too much flattery of others, can lead to suspicion and mistrust rather than increased liking and higher evaluation. So, the moral of this finding is very clear. While tactics of impression management often succeed, this is not always the case, and sometimes they can boomerang, adversely affecting reactions to the people who use them. There are certain techniques of impression management in organizational setup. To begin with, conformity, agreeing with someone else's opinion in order to gain his or her approval. For example, a manager tells his boss, "You are absolutely right on your reorganization plan for the Western Regional Office. I couldn't agree with you more." It is a kind of conformity. Next, favors, that is doing something nice for someone to gain that person's approval. It is a form of ingratiation again. So, the example here can be a salesperson says to a prospective client, like, "I have got 2 tickets to the theatre tonight that I can't use them. Take them, consider it as a thank you for taking the time to talk with me." Now, next is excuse. That means explanation of a predicament, creating event at minimizing the apparent severity of the predicament. So, here example could be a sales manager says to her boss, like, "We failed to get the ad in the paper on time, but no one responds to those ads anyways." Next, flattery, complimenting others about their virtues in an effort to make oneself appear perceptive and likable. Next is enhancement, that is claiming that something you did is more valuable than what others did. Now, this is also another self-focused impression management technique. Next, association, enhancing or protecting a person's image by managing the information with which one is associated. Now, next is apologies, admitting responsibility for an undesirable event and simultaneously seeking to get a pardon for the action. It's a kind of defensive impression management technique. So, example, an employee says to his boss, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake on the report. So, please forgive me." It's an apology after all. And next is self-promotion, highlighting one's best qualities and downplaying one's deficits, then calling attention to one's achievements. It's a kind of self-focused impression management technique. Next is, acclaiming, explanation of favorable events to maximize the desirable implications for oneself. Next is, exemplification, doing more than what you need to, in an effort to show how dedicated, how hardworking one is. It's like, overworking more than, kind of 8 hours work, staying in the office for till 8 or 9, and then, taking all the claim for their work. It's a kind of, assertive impression management techniques. So, these are, few impression management techniques specifically in organizational setup. As a summary, we can say that impression management effects seem to work more strongly when the measures of performance are subjective, however, than when they can be measured more objectively. For instance, those using impression management techniques were rated more highly for interpersonal effectiveness, but they could be more negatively evaluated on their business competence. So, overall, the findings of few studies suggest that there is some advantage to engage in impression management as long as the person delivers on the objective measures of performance as well. So, for those who intend to become leaders, especially, engaging in impression management techniques makes it more likely than they will be chosen. So, in today's episode, we have discussed about the concept of impression management, followed by self-presentation theories and the major approaches to impression management, followed by the techniques of impression management, especially in organizational setup. And of course, we have discussed about self-enhancement and other enhancement techniques as well.